My daughter told the world I'd been dead for 28 years. She didn't just cut me out of her life, she buried me. And I might have stayed in her graveyard of lies forever, if not for the $8.2 million inheritance that pulled me back into the light like a ghost nobody wanted to see. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. St. Louis, Missouri, April 12th, 2025. A gray Saturday that smelled like lilies and candle smoke. I walked into the church for my brother's funeral, wearing the only black suit I owned. People turned. My cousin Edna's face went white. I thought he was dead, she whispered, and she didn't mean my brother. Then I saw her, my daughter, standing tall beside the casket, the picture of sorrow, until her eyes met mine. The blood drained from her face. Her lips parted, but the word never came. Not Dad, not even how. She glanced away, jaw clenched, and hissed to a relative, "That can set be him." The hymn began. I sat in a pew, staring at her profile while whispers rippled like smoke. At the end, she slipped into a side hall of stained glass light. I followed. She spun the second she heard me. "You star's supposed to be dead." That wasn't set fear. It was irritation. "I sent you letters," I said. "Every Christmas, every birthday, postmarked, signed. You sent them back." Her eyes flicked past me, scanning for ears. "Nobody saw them. I told people you died in Siftus 97. Don Sifta ruin this. Don Nest ruin this." The words landed harder than any sermon. This wasn't about grief. It was about control. Mr. Hanson, my brother Sip's lawyer, appeared in the hall, a gray-suited man, envelope thick as a brick in his hand. He placed it into mine. "We still need to meet soon," he said. His eyes lingered. "There's Sip's quite a lot to settle." Inside the envelope, I would later find the will, property contracts, penciled dates, May 3rd, first office meeting, July 15th, projected filing, $8,200,000 on the line. And suddenly, my daughter's lie made sense. A dead man cannot inherit. She didn't just erase me for convenience. She erased me to claim everything I might leave behind. I walked back into the nave in a fog. Relatives avoided my eyes. Someone offered coffee in a styrofoam cup. I spilled half down the side. The urn hissed like it was shushing me. My daughter rejoined the crowd, playing the grieving niece. I was the ghost out of place at his own brother's burial. When the pallbearers lifted the casket, I touched the warm cherry wood and whispered, "I'll handle it." Whether I meant the estate or the daughter who tried to bury me, I didn't yet know. The rain had started when I drove home in my dented Ford. Wipers screeched across the glass. In the glove box lay the brass key to my safe deposit box. Pension statements, old pay stubs, and a 2019 photograph of me and my brother at Busch Stadium, date stamped in the corner. Paper proof that I had been alive all along. In my apartment, I set the envelope on the kitchen table. The clock ticked, the radiator hissed. On the counter sat my returned letters, rubber-banded by year: 1999, 2003, 2004, 2011, 2012, 2024. The top one bore the black stamp, "Return to sender, AD dress unknown." I didn't open them. Couldn't. Instead, I poured a whiskey and held the glass until the ice melted into water. My hand shook. Betrayal isn't a thunderclap. It's a leak that rots the beams until the house caves in. Sitting there, I felt the house of my life collapsing. I thought of 2015, when pneumonia pinned me to a hospital bed. 10 days, $2,800 in bills I scraped together alone. No visitors, not even a call, because to her I was already 6 feet under. The whiskey burned, but it couldn't numb the truth. The little girl who once called me daddy had turned me into a ghost, and she wanted me to stay that way. At midnight, I sat staring at the envelope under the weak kitchen light. $8.2 million of reasons she needed me gone. A lifetime of reasons I couldn't forgive her. I pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer. My hand trembled as I wrote. April 12th. Funeral. Envelope delivered. Daughter confirmed the lie. The pen left a groove in the paper. I dropped it. My chest felt hollow. I thought grief was supposed to come in waves. But this wasn't grief. It was collapse, like a mine shaft giving way under the weight of lies. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink, shut off the light, and sat in the dark. The envelope glowed faintly on the table. The room was quiet, except for the tick of the clock, each second a nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. When I woke the next morning, the kitchen table still looked like a crime scene. The thick envelope, the yellow pad with its single underlined line, the unopened stacks of letters, all of it sat there in silence, staring back at me. I'd barely slept. My dreams had been a slideshow of faces I hadn't seen in years, all whispering the same word, dead. Sunday morning in St. Louis usually smells like bacon grease and coffee from the apartments down the hall. Mine just smelled like paper. My throat was dry, my chest tight. The radiator clanged, reminding me that even rusted pipes could make more noise in the world than I had these past 28 years. I shuffled to the counter and picked up one of the returned letters. Postmarked December 2010. The stamp was a Santa Claus with his finger raised to his lips. Across the front, returned to sender. Address unknown. My own handwriting in blue ink. To my daughter, Merry Christmas, love, Dad. I pressed my thumb against the crease where it had never been opened. It felt like pressing a thumb against an unhealed scar. I thought about every holiday that letter represented. Empty chairs, cold plates, the sound of other families through thin apartment walls. I thought of 2015 again, when pneumonia kept me in St. Mary's for 10 days. I'd stared at the ceiling tiles, counting stains like constellations, while a nurse dropped the bill on my bed, $2,800 due before discharge. I signed it in shaky blue pen, coughing blood into tissues, waiting for a daughter who never came. She hadn't just forgotten me. She'd erased me so completely she couldn't even show up to confirm the deathbed. The shame came first. Maybe I had been a bad father. Maybe I deserved to be erased. I replayed every argument from the 90s, the slammed doors, the one time I yelled when she came home past midnight, the way I worked too many weekends at the construction site. Had I been too strict? Too absent? Was death the story she needed to tell to live with me gone? I sat at the table with my head in my hands, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. It wasn't a movie cry. No heaving chest, no poetic single tear, just hot, silent water leaking down my face, soaking into the envelope I hadn't opened. By noon, the shame had curdled into something darker. I pulled open drawers and cabinets, scattering old bills and receipts across the table like puzzle pieces. 2019, $699 car repair at Lindell Auto signed by me. 2021, bank deposit slip for $412, teller initials still visible. 2023, prescription refill for blood pressure meds at Walgreens on Gravois. Each one was a fingerprint of my existence. I piled them into stacks, then tore them apart, then piled them again, trying to make sense of a life that had happened but apparently left no witness. My apartment looked like a storm had hit it. Receipts on the floor, old pay stubs across the couch, Christmas cards scattered like leaves. I kept hearing her words, "You were supposed to be dead. Donset ruined this." At 3 o'clock I poured another whiskey. Neat, no ice, just the burn. It didn't soothe anything. It just added a blur to the edges of the room. My hand trembled when I lifted the glass, not from age, but from rage and collapse tangled together. I picked up the phone and stared at the contact list. A handful of numbers, most outdated. My brother's name was still there, though he'd been gone for weeks now. My daughter's number too, saved out of habit. I hovered over it. Part of me wanted to call and scream, "I'm alive." Another part wanted to hear her voice, just to see if she could fake grief as well as she faked my death. But I didn't press it. The silence was answer enough. By nightfall, the apartment was dark, except for the glow of the streetlight bleeding through blinds. The envelope sat unopened, a silent threat. I picked it up, turned it over, and felt the weight of paper that could either confirm or crush me. Inside lay proof that I wasn't just some forgotten old man. I was heir to millions. But the thought of fighting my own daughter over money felt like trying to patch a wound with glass. I set it back down and poured the whiskey down the sink. I watched the amber swirl vanish in the drain and whispered, "You win for now." My voice cracked. I went to bed early, but the night stretched like wire. I lay staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked around and around, the sound like a clock marking seconds I'd never get back. Every turn reminded me that time kept me alive, but her story had already buried me. By Monday morning, I woke with my chest hollow and my head pounding. The shame, the rage, the grief, all of it had settled like bricks on my ribs, but under those bricks was one more feeling, quieter, steadier, a seed of something I hadn't felt in decades, resolve. Because if she wanted me dead, then she had better prepare for what happens when the dead learn how to keep records. Monday morning, April 14th. I sat at the kitchen table with a headache that felt like a nail driven behind my eyes. The envelope still waited, fat with paper, my yellow legal pad open beside it. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote at the top, plan. 2 days earlier, at my brother's funeral, I had discovered my own death sentence, authored not by God but by my daughter. On Sunday, I collapsed under the weight of it. By Monday, the collapse had hardened into something sharper. If she wanted me gone on paper, then I would use paper to come back to life. I opened the envelope. Inside was the will, typed neat as a sermon. My name filled the line of air. $8.2 million in assets, most of it tied to land along the Mississippi my brother had held on to since the 80s. I read the figure twice, $8,200,000. The number looked unreal, like someone had left too many zeros on the page. My brother had trusted me, and if I let my daughter's lie stand, that trust would rot in her hands. I called Mr. Hansen's office and scheduled the meeting for Saturday, May 3rd, 10:30 a.m. He asked me to bring identification and any documentation that proved continued residence. His voice carried a weight I understood. He knew a storm was coming. I set down the receiver and began gathering what I had. From the safe deposit box at U.S. Bank on Kings Highway, I pulled my Missouri driver's license renewals, photocopies spanning 2009, 2015, 2021. Each bore my photo, my signature, my aging face. I slipped them into a folder labeled Proof of Life. Next came medical records. I called St. Mary's Hospital and requested a certified copy of my 2015 pneumonia stay. 10 days, $2,800 bill, paid in full by cashier's check. The clerk promised it would be mailed within 2 weeks. I marked the date, April 28th, on my calendar. Then the smaller things, postcards from my neighbor, Mrs. Crawford. She'd sent me one every Christmas with a cartoon Santa or snowman, each signed with my name when I mailed back a thank you. I walked down the hall to her apartment and knocked. She opened the door in her housecoat, eyes widening when she saw me holding the shoebox she had once mentioned. I kept them all, she said, pulling it out from under her bed. Holiday cards, every one addressed to her in my handwriting, postmarked year after year. I knew you weren't set gone. Her voice cracked, and for a moment the collapse in my chest softened. She hugged me, and I promised I'd bring them back safe. Back in my apartment, I laid the shoebox beside the folder. Proof, in red and green ink. By Wednesday, I had added bank slips to the pile. A 2019 car repair at Lindell Auto, $699 paid in cash, signed by me. A 2021 deposit slip for $412. A 2023 Walgreens prescription refill for lisinopril. My name printed bold across the label. Piece by piece, I was building a skeleton of evidence. Not just that I lived, but that I had lived in plain sight. But evidence alone wouldn't win. I needed strategy, so I pulled out the yellow pad again. Step 1. Gather proof of identity, residence, and activity. Step 2. Secure witness testimony. Mrs. Crawford, the bank clerk who notarized my pension checks. Step 3. Prepare for challenge in probate court. Target, July 15th filing. Step 4. Confrontation, public, undeniable. That last step I underlined 3 times. My daughter had lied in whispers. I needed the truth spoken loud enough to echo. On Friday night, April 18th, I tested my old digital recorder. Still worked. I slipped fresh batteries inside and placed it in the drawer near the phone. If I could get her to admit the lie again, on tape, it would be the nail in the coffin she built for me. But strategy didn't erase the ache. Some nights I still lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I was mad to fight. She was blood. She was supposed to bury me when I was truly gone. not before. Every plan I made carried the bitter taste of betrayal. Still, each document I stacked gave me breath. By the last week of April, the pile was thick. Licenses, receipts, postcards, medical records pending. I slipped them into a fireproof folder and placed it in my old lockbox. The key I wore on a chain around my neck. No one was going to bury me again, not without digging through iron. Saturday, May 3rd arrived clear and warm. I walked into Hansen and Keenlaw offices with the folder under my arm. Mr. Hansen looked up from his desk, glasses perched low. "You've been busy," he said. I spread the papers across his mahogany desk like a gambler laying down cards. "She wants me dead on paper," I said. "But I kept every receipt. She can kill a man who signs his name." He studied the stack, nodding slowly. "This is strong. Very strong. But be ready. She sell contest, and it won to step be pretty." "I don't need pretty," I told him. "I need true." Walking out of his office, folder clutched tight, I felt the first edge of resolve sharpen. My daughter had tried to erase me for nearly 3 decades, but now I had a calendar, a plan, and paper heavy enough to bring a ghost back to life. And if she thought she could win by lies, she had no idea what it means when a father decides to fight with truth. By the second week of May, the fog had cleared enough that my hands stopped shaking when I reached for things. The folder in my lockbox had become a ledger of living IDs, receipts, postcards, pay stubs, paper that said, in a way a whisper never could, I existed. Now I needed witnesses who would swear to it. Monday, May 10th. I walked down to Mrs. Crawford's with a small legal pad and a cup of coffee. The May sun smelled like cut grass and someone's barbecue across the alley. She answered the door in slippers and a sheet of newspaper tucked under her arm, and when I told her why I'd come, about the letters, about the funeral, her hands began to tremble. "You kept them," I said. "Would you sign something? An affidavit? Say you received my cards, that I visited, that I called on holidays?" She blinked, eyes filling. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, and hugged me like she'd been waiting. We sat at her kitchen table while she copied dates from the postcards. 1999, 2001, 2005, into the affidavit. She remembered the jokes I drew on the envelopes, the cheap stickers I used to seal them. Later that morning we walked to the notary in the shopping center. She swore it on the Bible they kept under the counter and signed for me in front of the notary public. I left with a stapled affidavit that smelled faintly of coffee and Mrs. Crawford's perfume. Next was the bank clerk. Her name was Tanya, and she still worked at the small branch where I'd cashed pension checks after retirement. I'd seen her once at the teller window, when I picked up copies of an old deposit slip. She remembered the man who always asked for the window seat on the bus, and who tipped with a dollar bill folded neat. I went to U.S. Bank on Kings Highway with my driver's licenses and the brass key on the chain. Safety deposit box access is strict in that bank. Rightly so, and I signed in under the watchful eye of a supervisor. The key turned in the lock like it had been waiting. Inside lay the photocopies I'd tucked there years ago, pension statements stamped with dates, an old Missouri ID renewal with my photo from 2015, and a deed photocopy for a parcel my brother owned near the river. I'd kept copies rather than originals, paranoia drilled from years of doing things myself, but the copies were enough to show continuity, my signature, my name, my steady presence. Tanya agreed to meet at the bank manager's office. She signed a short affidavit that read, in plain language, she had seen me cash checks in 2022, notarized envelopes bearing my name in 2023, and had interacted with me as a living customer as recently as last August. She wrote the dates herself in blue ink. The bank stamped it with an office seal. Paper and people together felt impossible to refute. But I didn't stop there. I called the county recorder's office and asked for a title search on the property listed in my brother's will. The woman I spoke with was blunt but helpful. "It shows in the county system," she told me. "Deed transferred in 1987, parcel number, property taxes paid through last year, no liens." I wrote down the parcel number and the clerk's name, another thread in the rope I was weaving. On Wednesday, May 12th, I met with Mr. Hansen. He sat behind his desk, spectacles low, fingers steepled. I laid out the affidavits from Mrs. Crawford and from Tanya, the photocopies from the safe deposit box, and the notes from the recorder's office. This gives us standing, he said. We can file a petition to confirm heirship and demand a probate hearing. Expect contestation. He tapped a paper calendar. If we file around July 15th, we should have a hearing scheduled for October. That's when this gets public. October. The word sounded like a bell. It gave me time to gather more, and it gave me a date I could use to focus the family's attention. Mr. Hansen recommended I secure more than documents. I needed testimony. He suggested a short list: my neighbor, the bank clerk, and if possible, someone from St. Mary's who could verify my 2015 stay. I called the hospital again and left a message for records to prioritize the certified copy. 2 weeks, the clerk said on the phone. I marked May 28th on my calendar and underlined it twice. On Friday, May 14th, I hired a private investigator. Hiring felt like admitting the war had begun, but Mr. Hansen had recommended someone reliable, a man named Rob from a small agency downtown who did title checks and witness interviews. Rob's fee wasn't small, but it bought me something more useful than results. It bought professional distance. He was efficient. He ran background checks, pulled up utility bills showing my name at the Wyoming Street address, and even obtained a copy of the 2019 Lindell Auto Repair invoice for $699 with my signature. All documents I'd found lying in drawers were now corroborated by neutral sources. Rob also offered a practical suggestion: get the affidavits into the public record sooner rather than later. He could file a sworn declaration with the county clerk's office that the affidavits existed and were truthful. People respond to the record, he said. Not all of them, but enough to make noise. So on May 20th, I went back to the county clerk with Mrs. Crawford and Tanya in tow. We filed sworn statements, simple, factual, and precise. I received Christmas cards addressed to the defendant from 1999 through 2023, Mrs. Crawford wrote. I witnessed Mr. my last name at the bank window on July 12, 2022, Tanya wrote. The clerk stamped them and handed me a carbon copy. The paper felt like armor. There were practical threads, too. I made photocopies of the $2,800 hospital bill and slid it into the file. I had Rob pull last decade's utility records, gas, water, electric, showing my name at the same address. I requested certified mail receipts for every affidavit I sent to Mr. Hansen. This was tedious, bureaucratic work. It was also righteous and small and very human. By the end of May, the pile on my kitchen table had graduated from a mess into evidence. It wasn't dramatic, no courtroom reveal yet, but it was real: affidavits, notarized statements, bank seals, title searches. Each piece made the lie a little less tidy. On the last day of the month, I sat at the table with all those papers spread out like a field. My recorder was charged and placed in a drawer where I could reach it. My hand hovered over the phone to call my daughter, wondering if I should bait her now or wait until the case was inevitable. Strategy matters, Mr. Hansen had said. Timing matters. I closed the folder and felt, for the first time in months, something that wasn't fear. It was a readiness. The methodical work had done what it always does. It turned raw hurt into structure, and structure, even more than anger, makes a man dangerous. Tomorrow, I would use the recorder. The next week, I would arrange a meeting where she couldn't spin the story without the sound of her own voice falling flat. For now, I turned the calendar page to June and circled the hospital's certified record due date. The march had begun. The first week of June carried the heavy heat Missouri is known for. By then, the folder on my kitchen table had grown into a binder thick enough to press flowers flat, documents in plastic sleeves, affidavits clipped neat, certified copies with stamps that caught the light. I had proof that I had been alive for every year she'd tried to kill me off. But paper was only half the fight. I needed her voice. On June 3rd, a Tuesday, I pulled the old digital recorder from the drawer and slipped in fresh batteries. I tested it, clicked record, spoke my name and the date, then played it back. Tinny, but clear enough. I slipped it into my shirt pocket and dialed her number from the kitchen phone. My hands shook, not from age but from the weight of what I was about to do. She picked up on the fourth ring. Her voice was sharp, hurried. Hello? Hello, sweetheart, it sets me. A pause, then an exhale like steam escaping a pipe. Dad, Dawn set call here, Dawn set. I let the silence work. The recorder hummed quietly against my chest. You've told people I'm dead, I said finally. You are dead, she snapped. To everyone that matters. Dawn sit make this harder. I was at the funeral. Everyone saw me. That was a mistake. You shouldn't have come. Her words were cold, like she was talking about a stranger who had ruined a performance. I asked softly, why after all these years? She hissed back, because it was easier. Because no one questions a death. Because it gave me peace. And now you set her ruining everything. The recorder caught it all, the words, the venom, the admission. I didn't press further. I ended the call with a simple, you'll hear from me soon. My hands trembled when I hit stop. Proof, her own voice confirming the lie. That night, I played it back over and over, listening to her tone, the way she owned the story of my burial. Each replay hardened me further. It wasn't grief anymore. It was fuel. By June 5th, I met with Mr. Hansen again, binder under my arm. I played the recording in his office. He leaned back, eyebrows climbing. She said it plain as day. That'll weigh heavy in court. He tapped the desk. But keep the original file secure. Courts don't like digital tampering accusations. We'll need a sworn affidavit from a sound engineer. Maybe even a transcript certified by a notary. Do it, I said. Every step you think we need. He nodded. We file mid-July. Until then, keep gathering. Don't tip your hand too far. Outside, the city air was thick with humidity and the smell of fried food from a cart on the corner. I walked home with the recorder like it was gold. June 10th. I got the certified hospital record in the mail. White envelope stamped with St. Mary's crest. Inside 10 days of charts from December 2015. My name, my diagnosis, to pneumonia, my signature on the discharge, and the $2,800 bill marked paid in full. I held it like a relic. If a man's life could be reduced to bills and signatures, then this was my resurrection document. By June 15th, the binder was nearly too heavy for one hand. I began scanning copies on the machine at the library, saving them to a flash drive. Redundancy. Every document in triplicate, binder, lockbox, digital. I wasn't going to lose my life twice. But paper and audio weren't enough. I needed to rattle her. On June 20th, I mailed a certified letter to her office. Not confrontational, just factual. Attached are copies of affidavits and records establishing my continued existence. I included the car repair slip, Mrs. Crawford's affidavit, and the hospital record. I left out the recording. That would be my hammer in October. The letter arrived signed for on June 23rd. I know because I tracked the certified receipt. Green card with her secretary's signature, proof that she could no longer deny awareness. That same week, I received an email from Hansen's office, a state hearing scheduled for October 2nd, 9 a.m. Probate Court, Division 3. Seeing the date in writing made my chest tighten. 4 months. 4 months until the world stopped whispering and started listening. But the revenge wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in the small steps. Each bill, each receipt, each affidavit layered into a wall she couldn't climb. I even made copies of my utility bills from 2018 and 2020, a Marin, Spire Gas, Water Division, each showing my name, my address. Mundane proof of life, the kind people throw away. But I had them, and in probate, mundane mattered. On June 30th, I visited Mrs. Crawford again. She made me tea and asked, "Do you think she shall admit it?" I shook my head. Not until she sips cornered. "You deserve better than this," she said, squeezing my hand. Better. Maybe, but justice would do. By early July, my binder was a fortress. I flipped through it at night, whispering the dates like a litany: 2010 Christmas card, 2015 hospital bill, 2019 auto repair, 2021 deposit slip, 2023 prescription refill, and now 2025 her voice on tape. On July 12th, I sat in Hanson Sip's office again, binder and recorder stacked in front of us. He looked over the paperwork, nodded, and slid the filing forms across the desk. We scepter ready. I signed my name in blue ink, the way I always had, a signature they'd tried to bury, and when I slid the papers back, I knew the dead man was alive, and his revenge was officially in motion. July in St. Louis feels like walking into a furnace. The air presses down on you, heavy and wet, and every sound, the cicadas, the passing cars, even the hum of a box fan, feels magnified. That heat carried into my life as the court date drew closer. The binder on my kitchen table had turned from a project into a weapon, and now every relative, every whisper, every email felt like a tremor before the earthquake. The first cracks came through family. On July 15th, a cousin named Mark texted me out of the blue, "Why would she tell everyone you died?" We all believed her. What's going on? His words were polite, but the confusion dripped with accusation, as if I had been the one lying. I sat staring at the phone, thumb hovering. Finally, I typed back, "I'll explain everything in October. For now, no, I never left." A day later, another message, this one from a niece. She says you're confused, that you're old and making things up. Do you need help? That cut deeper than I care to admit. She had told the world I was dead, and now that the truth surfaced, she shifted tactics, senility, convenient. A man who can't be trusted with memory can't be trusted with money. By the third week of July, the storm hit my lawyer's office. Hanson called me in, his voice tighter than usual. He laid an email across the desk. The header bold, subject, estate fraud. It was from my daughter. In her statement she wrote, "My father passed in 1997. Any documentation claiming otherwise is fraudulent. I am his only surviving heir." Her confidence dripped off the page. She even attached a death notice she had typed years ago, a crude Word document printed on plain paper. No date, no stamp, no signature, just her lie made official by repetition. I laughed when I read it, but it was the kind of laugh that curdled in my chest. Hanson didn't set laugh. "She seps trying to create noise," he said. "We set file our rebuttal with affidavits. But be prepared. She set, I'll drag your name through the mud." The mud came quickly. In late July, an old friend called me after running into her at a grocery store. She said, "You're unstable," he told me. Said you showed up at the funeral drunk, confused, that you've been sending fake letters for years. His voice carried doubt, even though he wanted to believe me. Lies travel fast when they're whispered at eye level in the frozen foods aisle. I wrote everything down on my calendar. July 15th. Estate filing submitted. July 17th. Mark's text. July 20th. Niece's email. July 22nd. Fraud claim email. Keeping the dates neat helped me keep my mind steady. Each entry felt like hammering nails into the timeline. So when October came, I could lay it all down and say, "Here, Judge, is what happened day by day." The pressure leaked into daily life too. My landlord pulled me aside one evening, embarrassed. "Your daughter called here," he said. "Asked if you were really the tenant or if someone was squatting in your apartment." He shook his head, muttering, "Strangest thing I've ever heard. Why would she?" His voice trailed off. I showed him my lease renewal from 2022, my signature across the bottom. He nodded, uneasy. Lies don't just attack reputation, they unsettle the ground you walk on. By August 1st, the strain was visible. Family dinners I wasn't invited to, cousins suddenly too busy to answer calls, whispers echoing across pews at Sunday service. In one particularly bitter moment, a neighbor down the hall muttered, "Thought you were dead," as he passed me in the stairwell. He smirked, as if it were a joke. I carried his words with me the whole night. But even in the suffocating heat, the binder grew thicker. On August 5th, Rob, the PI, delivered a folder of utility records, gas, electric, water, spanning 2010 to 2024, all in my name at the same Wyoming Street address. "They're boring," he said, sliding them across the table, "which makes them perfect. Boring is bulletproof." That week, I also received the certified transcript of the recorded phone call. A notary had stamped each page, confirming the words were true. Reading her voice in black and white print was like pressing my hand to an open wound. "You're supposed to be dead. Don't ruin this." There it was, immortalized in ink. Still, the tension didn't just sit on paper, it sat in my body. I started waking at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan as it ticked like a slow metronome. The apartment felt too small, the walls too thin. I paced between the kitchen table and the front window, binder in hand, rehearsing in my head how I would present it in court. One night, after tossing until dawn, I opened the binder and spread everything across the table: affidavits, receipts, bills, recordings, transcripts, my life reduced to paper islands under a yellow kitchen light. I whispered to myself, "They'll see. They'll all see." Saying it out loud helped. On August 10th, Hansen called with news. "Probate court has confirmed the hearing for October 2nd, Division 3. Your daughter's attorney has already filed a preliminary statement claiming fraud, but we'll be ready." His tone steadied me. There was comfort in hearing a lawyer sound confident. As the weeks crawled by, tension thickened like humidity. By late August, rumors reached me that she was telling coworkers her father was an imposter, a fraudster trying to scam his way into millions. She was weaving a new web, even as the old one unraveled. I circled each lie on my legal pad like an enemy position on a battlefield map. September arrived with no relief from the heat. The days shortened, but the pressure didn't. I received another letter from her lawyer, blunt and cold. "We will contest the estate vigorously on grounds of fraud and fabrication." I placed it into the binder with steady hands. Every threat she sent became part of the evidence against her. By mid-September, I had grown strangely calm. The collapse of April was gone. In its place was a taut wire of focus. Every rumor, every whisper, every accusation only tightened the line. October was no longer a date on a page. It was a destination, a finish line. And in the stillness of late September nights, when the air finally cooled enough to let the windows open, I sat with the binder on my lap and thought, she buried me with lies, but she never counted on the resurrection of truth. The stage was set. The showdown waited in October. October 2nd, 2025. St. Louis Probate Court, Division 3. The building smelled like old varnish and coffee that had been warming since dawn. My binder rode under my arm like a second rib cage. When I pushed through the heavy wooden doors, the room turned and looked: lawyers in navy suits, a bailiff with a jaw like granite, a clerk arranging files with the tidy precision of someone who hates chaos. My daughter sat at the respondent's table in a fitted suit, hair perfect, eyes flat. Beside her, a tall attorney with silver at his temples scrolled through notes on a tablet. She didn't look at me. She looked past me, as if I were air, as if ghosts didn't cast shadows. Division 3 is now in session. The bailiff called. All rise. Judge Alvarez took the bench. She had the kind of presence that quiets a room without raising a voice. She scanned the docket, then lifted her eyes to the tables. Estate of Michael R. Brother Sips, last name, petition to confirm heirship, appearances. David Hansen for the petitioner, my lawyer said, gesturing to me. Robert Finch for the respondent, her lawyer said smoothly, touching his client's sleeve as if to remind the court she existed and I didn't. Very well, the judge said. Mr. Hansen, call your first witness. We didn't start with me. Hansen started with paper. Your Honor, before testimony, we'd like to move into evidence petitioner's exhibits A through H. He numbered them as the clerk took copies, including but not limited to notarized affidavits from 2 independent witnesses, certified medical records from St. Mary's Hospital dated December 2015, bank records and utility statements spanning 2010-2024, and a certified transcript of a phone call between respondent and petitioner dated June 3, 2025. Mr. Finch was on his feet. Objection to the transcript on authenticity. Hansen didn't miss a beat. The original recording device is present in court, Your Honor. We have a sworn statement from a neutral notary attesting to the transcription. Chain of custody is documented. We still lay foundation with witness testimony. Overruled for now, Judge Alvarez said. Foundation to be established. Proceed. Hansen called Mrs. Crawford first. She walked slowly to the stand in her best blouse, hands folded around her handbag like it might try to escape. She swore in with a clear voice. "Mrs. Crawford," Hanson said gently, "how do you know the petitioner?" "He Seps, my neighbor," she said, smiling toward me. "Since the late Seps 90s, we have coffee on Fridays. He fixes my sink when it leaks." "Did you receive Christmas cards from him regularly?" "Every year," she said. "Since 1999, I saved them." She tapped the shoebox we sipped brought. "He always drew little snowmen on the envelope." "Your Honor," Hanson said, "Exhibit B. The shoebox of holiday cards postmarks ranging 1999, 2023. Finch stood. Objection. Relevance. "Overruled," the judge said, without looking up. "It goes to continued existence and residence." Continue. Finch cross-examined. "Mrs. Crawford, you set for fond of Mr. My last name. Arn set you." "I sept some fond of honest people," she said. "That septs why I accept some here." A ripple of laughter washed the gallery. The judge's mouth twitched. Finch sat. Hanson called Tanya, the bank clerk. Next. Uniformed, precise. "Do you recognize the man sitting at counsel table?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. He Sep's been a customer for years. He notarized envelopes for his pension checks in 2023. I saw him at my window last August." "Exhibit D," Hanson said. "Affidavit signed by Miss Last Name, stamped by the bank." Finch tried the same angle. "Do you keep perfect memory of every customer?" "No," she said. "But I remember men who say please and thank you." She looked at me again. "He always did." Then came Rob, the PI, utility records, and lease renewals. I verified Ameren, Spire Gas, and Water Division accounts in petitioner's name for the Wyoming Street apartment from 2010 through 2024, he said, holding up certified printouts. I also obtained a copy of a 2019 invoice from Lindell Auto, $699, signed by the petitioner. Finch objected to the PSIP's scope. "Your Honor, this is a probate matter, not a grand tour of every receipt the man has ever touched." The Judge Espet's eyes sharpened. "Counsel, if your client asserts the petitioner is deceased, receipts showing life are relevant." Overruled. Hanson looked at me, and I knew it was my turn. I stood, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore. I could feel my own pulse in my fingertips. "State your name," Hanson said. I did. "Mr. My last name. Where do you live?" "Wyoming Street, St. Louis. Been there a long while." He guided me through the timeline. Not grand speeches, just stones across a river. "Did you undergo a hospital stay in December of 2015? "Yes," I said. "Pneumonia. 10 days. Paid a $2,800 bill by cashier Sep's check." "Exhibit C," he said. "Certified medical records from St. Mary Sep's Hospital. Your Honor, note discharge signature and payment receipt." I looked at my daughter. Her face did not move. "Did you maintain contact with your daughter after 1997? Hanson asked. "I tried," I said, voice low. "Letters every Christmas, every birthday. They came back with return to sender stamped across my name." "What did your daughter say to you at your brother Sep's funeral on April 12th of this year?" I swallowed. The church light flashed in my mind. She said, "Fos to be dead. Don't fit ruin this essa." Finch objected, hearsay. But the judge lifted a hand. "We have a proffer of a later admission." Overruled at this time. Hanson nodded to the clerk, then to me. "Mr. My last name, do you recognize this device?" "My recorder," I said. June 3rd, I called her. I recorded the call. We laid the foundation, original device, date, batteries replaced and sealed, the notary's transcript. Hanson pressed play. The courtroom filled with the tinny hum. My careful, "Hello, sweetheart. It's me." And then her voice, a voice I had known since it first said Daddy. Cold, controlled, unmistakable. "You're supposed to be dead. Don't ruin this." The admission, clear as glass. The gallery air changed. A murmur curled through the seats, like wind through tall grass. The judge lifted her eyes to my daughter for the first time with something like curiosity. Finch rose. "Your Honor, we contest the authenticity. Voices can be manipulated. And even if it were her, she was speaking metaphorically, emotionally, not literally. Hansen didn't bother to hide a smile. We also submitted the certified transcript with the notary's seal and were prepared to produce the notary for testimony. But more important, counsel metaphors don't file emails to this court claiming a man died in 1997. He lifted a page. Respondent's email of July 22nd, subject line, estate fraud. She repeats that he is deceased and attaches a typed death notice with no certification, no county seal, no certificate number. The judge held out a hand. Let me see that. She studied the page, thumb tracing the edge. Counsel, where is the official death certificate? If your client SIP's assertion is that the petitioner died in 1997. Finstep's composure faltered. Your Honor, there may have been a clerical loss, records from that era. No, the judge said, calm as a hammer. There may not. The state of Missouri issues death certificates. If you want this court to accept the fiction of death, produce one. Silence pooled, my daughter's eyes fixed on the table. Finch pivoted. We do have an HR bereavement record from 1997, he said, lifting a document. My client received 3 days SEFT-paid leave on the representation that her father had passed. This corroborates her good faith belief. Hansen stepped forward. It corroborates only that she told her employer a lie 28 years ago. The absence of a death certificate is not an administrative oversight. It accepts the truth, poking through her story. The judge's gaze settled on my daughter. Miss her last name, if you wish to be heard, now would be the time. She stood like a ballerina on a stage she no longer controlled. He left, she said. Voice steady. He left when I needed him. I decided he was gone, and everyone accepted it. It made my life simpler. She swallowed. You never thought he would walk into a church, the judge finished, not unkindly, or into my courtroom. My daughter's eyes slid to me, then away. I didn't think it mattered. It matters, the judge said. Hansen rested a hand on my shoulder. He didn't need to say anything else. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. This court's duty is not to manage family grief. It is to enforce the law. The petitioner has provided certified medical records, bank and utility documentation, notarized affidavits, and a recording accompanied by a certified transcript. The respondent has produced no death certificate, only a self-authored notice, and an HR form that at best proves a long-standing misrepresentation. She lifted the gavel slightly, then set it down without striking. The petition to confirm heirship is granted. The court recognizes the petitioner as the lawful heir under the will of Michael Ard Brothers' last name. The clerk will prepare the order. Any further issues regarding distribution will be set by the probate schedule. She paused, then added, Softer counsel for respondent. Consider advising your client regarding the risks of continued false statements to this court. The sound the gavel finally made echoed in my ribs. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the gallery exhaled. I felt my legs again. Hansen squeezed my shoulder, a small, steady pressure that said, breathe. My daughter didn't look at me as she gathered her bag. She brushed past the table with the same precision she had used to erase me. No mess, no apology, just absence. At the door, she hesitated, as if she might turn. She didn't. Outside, the October air had the first bite of cold. The courthouse steps were crowded with people whose lives were not mine, faces turned toward their own verdicts and papers and promises. I stood under a sky the color of pewter and let the chill cut through the courtroom heat. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar. I scrolled back through the months: April 12, May 3rd, July 15th, August 10th, and then forward to today. I typed a single line: October 2nd. Confirmed heir. Truth recognized. Hansen joined me on the top step. You okay? He asked. I will be, I said. Truth is heavier than I remember, but it carries itself. He nodded toward the street. Go home. Light your fireplace. We handle the papers. I watched my daughter cross the far sidewalk and disappear into a dark sedan. For a moment I could see the little girl on my shoulders at a ball game, Then the car door shut, and the memory went quiet. I tucked the binder under my arm and started down the steps. Justice isn't applause. It's the sudden absence of doubt. There was still fallout to come. Family, work, the long shadow of 28 years. But in that moment, with the order ink still drying inside, I felt something I hadn't felt since April, steady on my feet. The stage lights were off. The performance was over. What came next would be life. The courthouse had given me paper victory, but paper doesn't silence whispers. By the time I got home that evening, fallout had already begun. The first call came from my cousin Edna. Her voice was shaky, almost embarrassed. "I don't know what to say," she told me. She swore up and down you set been gone for years. We all believed her. I leaned against the kitchen counter, binder still under my arm. "Edna," I said, "belief doesn't change the truth." There was a pause. She tried to apologize, but every word sounded smaller than the lie that had lasted 28 years. I told her I forgave her, but forgiveness felt heavy in my mouth. By the next morning, my daughter's world was already unraveling. A nephew called to tell me that her employer, big insurance company downtown, had placed her on leave pending internal review. The HR manager said her integrity was in question. I knew exactly what that meant. She'd built her whole career on compliance, on trust. Now her own voice saying, "You're supposed to be dead," was spreading like wildfire in the family, and rumors have a way of finding the office water cooler. Neighbors who once avoided my eyes suddenly stopped me in the hallway to say, "We're glad you're back." Back? I wanted to snap. I hadn't gone anywhere. But I nodded, polite, because ghosts don't get to argue with the living. On October 5th, I walked to the corner store for milk and bread. The cashier, a kid who couldn't have been born when the lie started, squinted at me. "Aren't you the guy from the news blurb?" he asked. I frowned. He pulled out his phone. There it was, a local blog headline. "Daughter declares father dead. Court proves otherwise in $8.2 million estate case." The story had leaked. My chest tightened. I bought the milk, paid cash, and walked home fast. That night I sat staring at the binder. Victory in court didn't erase what she'd done. If anything, it made the betrayal heavier. Family called not to comfort me, but to gossip, to pick sides. Half wanted to know if I'd share the inheritance. The other half wanted to know how she could lie so long. No one asked how it felt to sit at Christmas with unopened letters, or to cough blood in a hospital bed with no visitor. The silence from my daughter was worse. She didn't call, didn't write, but her absence made noise in every corner. A week after the trial, I passed a church bulletin board with a flyer for a harvest dinner. A group of women glanced at me, whispered, then turned away. I wasn't dead anymore, but I wasn't quite alive either. I was a headline, a cautionary tale. On October 12th, Hansen called with practical news. "Distribution will take time," he said. "The estate assets need liquidating. Land sale is pending. Expect disbursement before Christmas." $8 million sounded enormous on paper, but what I felt was smaller than a man. "Spend it wisely," Hansen added. "Money can't fix ghosts." He didn't know how right he was. The following day, a letter came from my landlord. He'd read the story too. He wanted assurance I'd be able to keep paying rent. I laughed bitterly. $8.2 million on the horizon, and I still had to convince someone I could cover $700 a month. I made a copy of Hansen's letter, circled the figure, and slid it under his office door. Ghosts apparently need credit references. By late October, the social fallout deepened. Relatives who once swore loyalty to her began calling me, apologizing, begging me not to cut them off. One uncle left a voicemail. "She lied to all of us, but don't punish the family for her choices." I replayed it twice, then deleted it. They had believed the lie because it was easier. Easier than asking questions. Easier than sending a card. At night, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker. The binder sat on the table, now less a weapon than a monument. Proof I existed. Proof she had tried to erase me. But the court order, the headlines, the family calls, they didn't give me peace. They gave me noise. On October 20th, I walked past her office downtown. Glass towers, revolving doors. I stood across the street, watching people in suits stream in and out. She wasn't there. I knew she'd been suspended. But I pictured her once, 20 years earlier, walking in with ambition in her eyes, telling people her father had died, a death that bought her sympathy, maybe even promotions. A false grave turned into a ladder. My chest ached. By Halloween, kids knocked on my door for candy. I dropped fun-sized chocolates into their bags, smiling at their costumes. One mother looked at me hard before whispering, "Good to see you back. Back, always back." No one seemed to realize that being erased had taken 28 years I could never reclaim. But I didn't argue. I handed out candy, locked the door, and sat alone in the quiet. $8 million would soon be in my name. My daughter's reputation was collapsing. Justice had been done, and yet I felt like a man still clawing out of the dirt of a grave he never asked for. I poured myself a glass of water, set it on the table beside the binder, and whispered into the silence, "Truth has weight, but sometimes it weighs too much." By November, the air in St. Louis carried that sharp edge that tells you fall is nearly gone and winter is on its way. Leaves curled brown in the gutters, and the courthouse echoes had finally quieted. The papers were signed. The order was entered. What remained was justice, not vengeance for its own sake, but balance. The estate liquidation began mid-November. Hansen called with the news. "Sale closed on the river parcels," he said, his voice steady as always. "Funds transferring through escrow. Expect deposits within 2 weeks." The figure was enormous. $8.2 million. A sum I could hardly picture, let alone hold. I wasn't the sort of man who thought in millions. My life had always been wages in envelopes, bills taped to the fridge, hospital receipts folded into drawers. Money had been survival, never abundance. But now, abundance was mine. The first act of justice was simple. I paid off every debt that had shadowed me. Old credit card balances, lingering medical fees, even a stubborn $600 bill from a roofing repair I'd put off for too long. One by one, I wrote checks in blue ink, signed with the name my daughter had tried to erase. Each signature felt like a resurrection. Next, I thought of Mrs. Crawford. She had saved my cards, sworn in court, stood by me when even family had not. I knocked on her door the week after Thanksgiving with a folded document in hand. "The roof you've been patching with tar every spring," I told her. "It's time it was fixed properly." I handed her a contract already signed, paid in full for a new roof, siding, and windows. Her eyes filled, and she whispered, "You didn't have to." "I did," I said simply, "because you remembered me when it mattered." The second act of justice was more symbolic. I took a drive out to my brother's old property, land I now owned free and clear. The fields stretched bare under the gray November sky. I parked my truck, stepped out, and pressed the deed into my palm like it was a living thing. My brother had worked his whole life to hold on to this land. He had chosen me, not her, to carry it forward. And despite her lies, here I stood, alive. Legal, recognized. I whispered to the wind, "I'll take care of it." But justice wasn't just about rewarding loyalty or honoring the dead. It was about boundaries. My daughter had tried to bury me for cash, and now the cash had buried her lies instead. Every whisper in the family circled back to the courtroom. Every cousin who once believed her now avoided her. She walked into rooms, and silence followed her like a shadow. That was the justice she feared most. Not losing the money, but losing the image she had built on a false grave. Still, I didn't celebrate her ruin. Justice is balance, not cruelty. I didn't publish the transcript, didn't spread the recording beyond court. I didn't need to. The truth was already in the record books, stamped and sealed. She would live with that, and I would live with my own dignity intact. On December 1st, the wire transfer hit my account. $8.2 million. The numbers glowed on the bank screen like they belonged to someone else. I printed the confirmation slip, folded it carefully, and slid it into my binder beside the hospital bill, the receipts, the affidavits. Proof of life, proof of victory, proof of justice, all together in one file. With the money, I bought my brother's old house outright, restoring it instead of selling it. The first night I slept there, fire in the hearth, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Rooted. No more apartments. No more returned letters. This was mine. Legally. Permanently. I carried the deed in my pocket for a week, like a talisman. Christmas lights began appearing around the neighborhood. Families gathering, children laughing. For years I had been the ghost outside those windows, the man people whispered about. Now, as I hung a single string of lights across the porch of my brother's house, I thought, justice doesn't erase the past, but it steadies the present. I invited Mrs. Crawford over for dinner. I even asked Hanson to join. We ate pot roast at the long oak table, my brother once used for family gatherings. At the end of the night, Hanson raised a glass. To truth, he said, hard fought, but never buried. I clinked his glass and replied, to boundaries, to knowing when enough is enough. Because that's what justice truly was for me. Not vengeance, not destruction, but the act of setting a line in stone and saying, you cannot cross this again. My daughter never called, she never wrote, and I never chased her. Justice didn't require reconciliation. It required recognition, and I had that now, stamped with the seal of the state, inked in the record books, whispered through every family story. When I closed my eyes at night, I no longer saw the coffin she'd built for me. I saw a ledger balanced. Winter set in across Missouri, and for the first time in nearly 3 decades, I sat in a house that was truly mine. My brother's home creaked under the cold the way old houses do, pipes knocking, floors groaning, but every sound reminded me I was no longer just surviving. I was living. I lit a fire in the hearth one evening in mid-December, the flames chewing through seasoned oak. The binder rested on the coffee table, its spine swollen with affidavits, receipts, hospital bills, transcripts, the paper bones of my resurrection. I didn't need to keep it so close anymore, but part of me couldn't put it away. It was proof that I had not just existed, but fought. I leafed through the postcards. Mrs. Crawford had given back after the trial, her neat handwriting wishing me Merry Christmas. My replies written in the margin. Snowmen drawn in blue pen, a habit I'd nearly forgotten. Those cards had lived in her shoebox when my daughter pretended I lived in a grave. They had kept me alive in ink and memory. And then there were the letters I'd written to my daughter, the ones that always came back stamped, returned to sender. I held one from 2007. My handwriting was younger, steadier. Happy birthday. I'm proud of you. Love, Dad. She had never read it. She never would. I slid it back into the envelope and placed it carefully in the binder, not as evidence now, but as history. The inheritance had brought comfort. My debts cleared, my brother's land restored, my roof secure, but wealth wasn't what filled the room that night. It was the quiet. For years my life had been defined by absence, an empty chair at holidays, unanswered calls, unopened letters. Now there was no need to wait for anything. The silence was mine, not hers. Sometimes, though, that silence hurt. I would look at the mantel where I'd placed a single framed photo, me and her years ago, her arms around my neck at a Cardinals game. She couldn't have been more than 10. The picture was sun-faded, edges fraying. She had once looked at me with joy, not calculation. I'd carried that memory through 28 years of absence, and it felt heavier now than ever. I thought about calling her, even after everything. Not to reconcile, but to tell her the truth had set me free, whether she liked it or not. But the phone stayed on the table. Justice had already spoken. Sometimes reaching back only pulls you under again. As Christmas neared, family members sent cards. A cousin wrote, "We're glad to see you back, alive." That word, alive, landed differently now. People threw it around like it was casual, but to me it was everything. I had been erased. To be seen as alive again was both vindication and a wound. One evening, Hanson stopped by with paperwork. After we signed the final distribution forms, he lingered. "How do you feel now that it's over?" he asked. I stared at the fire. Like I'd been carrying a coffin on my back. Now its heft is finally on the ground. He nodded. Justice isn't at peace, but it sets weight off the shoulders. "Maybe," I said. "But peace doesn't come from court orders. It comes from knowing where to stop." Later that night, I sat by the window, the snow just beginning to fall. I whispered to the dark glass, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." The words floated in the quiet like smoke. They weren't for her, they were for me. That became my reflection. I hadn't been taken by death or misfortune. I had been given away by someone who chose convenience over truth. And now, by proving I was alive, I had taken myself back. I thought about how revenge stories often end with cruelty, with someone ruined, humiliated, destroyed. But mine ended differently. I hadn't destroyed her. I'd simply forced the world to see me as I was living, breathing, rightful. That was enough. The binder remained on the coffee table, but not as a weapon anymore. It was a monument. Proof that lies can last decades, but truth lasts longer. Proof that a father's life is not erased by his daughter's convenience. The snow fell heavier outside, blanketing the street in quiet white. I watched it gather on the porch I now owned, under the roof I had earned, on the land that was mine by right and by will. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt steady, present, alive. And I knew this. Justice isn't loud. It isn't fireworks or applause. It's the steady flame in the hearth, the signed deed in your pocket, the silence of a house that belongs to you. It's knowing the truth stands, even if love does not. 6 weeks after the courtroom verdict, life had taken on a strange rhythm. The storm had passed, but the echoes stayed. The papers were all signed, the money secure, the estate in my name. On the surface, everything was settled. But in my chest, it still felt unsettled, like the dust hadn't quite landed after a demolition. It was a gray January morning when the letter arrived. The envelope was plain, postmarked 2 towns over. My daughter's handwriting, older now, but still hers, spelled out my name. Seeing it made my throat tighten. For nearly 3 decades, my letters had come back unopened. Now here was one, finally sent to me. I held it for a long while at the kitchen table. The binder sat just a foot away, stuffed with every receipt and affidavit that proved I was alive. The fire popped in the hearth. Outside, snow slushed on the street. Inside my hand, her letter felt heavy. I didn't open it. I slid it into the drawer with my own returned envelopes, the Christmas cards, the birthday notes, all marked "Return to Sender." This new letter belonged with them. Part of the same story. Some graves stay closed. In the weeks that followed, whispers kept circulating through the family. Some cousins reached out, cautiously. A voicemail here, a short text there. We should catch up, but I kept my replies polite and brief. I didn't owe them explanations. They had chosen the easier story for nearly 30 years. They could live with the harder one now. At church, people looked at me with a mix of pity and curiosity. A woman I'd known since childhood pressed my hand and said, "You're a miracle, coming back after all this time." I smiled faintly, but inside I thought I didn't come back. I never left. The newspapers eventually moved on. The headlines about the dead man and the inheritance scandal were replaced with other stories. Politics, crime, the next tragedy. But even as the world forgot, I remembered. Memory is heavier than newsprint. I poured my focus into small, steady things, repairing the porch steps on the house, painting the kitchen walls a pale gray that felt clean, hanging curtains in the upstairs windows where the glass rattled in the wind. Each nail I hammered reminded me that I was no longer waiting to be erased. Still, there were nights when silence pressed too close. I'd sit in the living room, binder on the table, fire crackling, and think about the years I'd lost. 28 Christmases alone. 28 birthdays with silence instead of a phone call. Grief is strange. It doesn't vanish when justice comes. It lingers in the spaces money can't touch. One evening in February, I found myself driving past the old apartment building where I had lived when the lie began. The windows were lit, curtains drawn, life going on for someone else inside. I parked for a moment, staring up at the brick facade. I thought about all the letters I'd written at that kitchen table, all the hopes I'd licked into envelopes, only to have them come back like boomerangs. I whispered to the building, "I survived you," and then drove away. The inheritance had made me wealthy, at least by numbers. But what mattered more was the boundary it built. No one could erase me now. My name was etched into the public record, into deeds and court orders. My daughter could keep telling lies, but the law had spoken. That was enough. As winter edged towards spring, I found myself sitting less with the binder and more with the future. I donated to the church's roof fund. I promised Hanson I'd draft a clear will so no one could twist my story when my time truly came. And I walked the land my brother left me, feeling the soil crunch under my boots, promising him I'd keep it in the family, not in the hands of someone who had declared me dead. The letter from her stayed in the drawer. I never opened it. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was nothing at all. Whatever it contained, it couldn't undo the silence of 28 years. Some doors once closed aren't meant to be reopened. And so the aftermath wasn't fireworks. It wasn't triumph shouted from rooftops. It was quieter, heavier, but real. A man who had been erased, learning how to live again, one day at a time, in the shadow of his own survival. Christmas of 2025 arrived colder than I remembered. Snow piled along the sidewalks, muffling the city into a strange hush. Families gathered in living rooms. Children unwrapped gifts. Church bells rang. But for me, the season carried a sharper edge. It was my first Christmas as a man officially returned from the dead. On December 23rd, I opened the mailbox outside my brother's old house. Inside, among the holiday flyers and utility statements, was a single card, a cousin's handwriting scrawled across the front. Glad to see you back, alive. That word again.
Alive.
Casual to them, monumental to me. I held the card, staring at it under the porch light, the snowflakes sticking to the paper. For nearly 3 decades, the world had accepted my death because it was easier. Now they welcomed me back as if I'd stepped off a bus from a long trip. They didn't understand what it meant to live in silence for 28 years. I went inside, lit a fire, and placed the card on the mantel. Next to it sat the binder, my monument, my lifeline. It held every receipt, every affidavit, every proof that I had lived when my own blood said otherwise. But tonight, it wasn't proof I needed. It was peace. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table. Across from me, the drawer held her unopened letter. It had been weeks since it arrived, and still I hadn't read it. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was venom. Maybe it was just blank paper meant to pull me back into the grave she built. Whatever it was, it couldn't change what had been done. Some graves stay closed. The irony of it all pressed heavy that night. She had declared me dead to everyone who would listen. She had turned her own father into a ghost, all for a chance at inheritance. And yet when real money finally came, it went not to her but to the man she buried. The cash she tried to claim had instead unearthed me. Her lie was the shovel. The truth was the resurrection. As I sat there, the fire crackling, I thought about what I'd lost. 28 years of birthdays, Christmases, small phone calls about nothing in particular. Those can't be bought back, not with $8.2 million. Not with 10 times that. She didn't just rob me of time with her. She robbed herself of a father. The final irony was simple. She hadn't lost me. She had given me away. I whispered it aloud, letting the words settle into the air. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. I stood, placed the water glass in the sink, and pulled the curtains shut against the snow. Outside, the world kept turning, neighbors laughing, families dining, church bells ringing. Inside, I felt the quiet of justice. Not joy, not triumph, but balance. I walked back to the fire, slid the binder closed, and placed it carefully on the bottom shelf of the bookcase. It didn't need to sit on the table anymore. The fight was over. On Christmas morning, I woke to sunlight glinting off snowdrifts. I brewed coffee, ate eggs in the quiet, and opened the cousin's card again. Glad to see you back, alive. I almost laughed. Alive. Such a cheap word, until someone steals it from you. I pinned the card to the corkboard above the desk, where my yellow legal pad still sat, half filled with notes from the battle. The pad could stay there too, a relic of the war I had fought with paper and patience. That afternoon, I walked the land my brother left me. The fields stretched quiet under the snow, fences lined with ice. My boots crunched across the frozen ground, and I thought about how he must have stood here years ago, deciding I was the one to carry his legacy. He had trusted me, even when my daughter hadn't. And now, by law, by truth, by stubborn breath, I stood here alive, carrying that trust. I turned back toward the house, smoke curling from the chimney, warm light spilling through frosted glass. For the first time in years, I felt steady. I wasn't waiting for a phone call that would never come. I wasn't hoping for a card that would only be returned. I was living, recognized, undeniable. Justice had been served, and in its quiet way, it was enough.